Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Lexi stood by the front door with that cobalt blue suitcase. The same one we bought at the outlet in Spokane, still had the scuff from Atlanta. Her smile was flat, eyes sharp. "That's that," she said, and the door slammed behind her like a gavel. The air barely moved. Gabby froze near the kitchen island with her phone still in her hand, thumb hovering mid-text. Millie sat stiff in the dining room chair Lexi just left, still staring at the empty space like it might speak. I took one breath, then another. My chest felt like someone had vacuumed out everything inside it, but my voice came out steady. "She'll cool off," I said, because that's what I do. I say the thing that keeps the room from breaking in half. Millie looked up, her voice low but clear. "Or maybe we don't need her." That one hit deep. Not because it wasn't true, but because I could tell how long she'd been holding it in, waiting for the right moment, or maybe any moment at all. Before we continue, tell us which city or country you're listening from. Let's see which corners of the world we've gathered from today. Thanks. And now the story. The next few minutes were muscle memory. I told Gabby to order something from China Dragon and made sure no one was crying before I stepped into my office. Shut the door quietly. Pulled open the bottom drawer like I was reaching for something useful. There it was. The photo. Lexi in that sundress with the twisted back strap, sitting on the railing at Red Barn Hall the summer we toured it for Casey's wedding. Her head was tossed back laughing. Sunlight caught in her hair like it belonged there. She didn't know I took it. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have, then closed the drawer. I didn't toss it. I don't know why. I remember Dorothy once pulled me aside before the wedding, before the kids, before the mortgage. We were in her kitchen, peeling potatoes. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Clark, she burns bright and burns through people." I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Dinner came in brown paper bags. We sat around the table with 3 chopstick sets and 4 plates, because habit is a weird beast. Nobody touched the 4th plate. "I got Mandarin chicken," Gabby said. "Dad, yours is beef and broccoli, right?" "Yeah, thanks." I smiled. I made a grocery list while we ate. Paper towels, vitamins, cereal, laundry pods. It helped. Lexi texted later. "Just 2 words. Don't call. No reason. No follow-up. No plan for the girls. Just that." It was the kind of silence that felt like it was trying to make a point. I kept my phone face down after that. Not because I was waiting, but because I didn't want to catch myself hoping. I folded laundry in the living room. Millie had left a flyer in the basket. Open house in the new development up on Willow Crest. Big kitchen, double sinks, quartz counters. Lexi's handwriting was on the corner. "We should trade up." I stared at the flyer. She'd circled the listing price in red like she always did. I crumpled it, tossed it into the trash under the sink, and took out the bag right then. Later that night, I lay in bed not counting sheep, but costs, heating, groceries, school fees, mortgage, brakes on the Outback, cell plans, gas. I didn't cry. That's not how I work. But I made a promise. Right there, flat on my back in a half-warm bed, I made myself a promise I could actually keep. I'd keep every system running, even if I had to do the lifting myself. I woke up the next morning with that same promise in my chest, tight but steady. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, like someone had taken a brick out of the foundation and left a draft behind. I brewed coffee, packed lunches, and pushed the girls out the door with the same lines I always used, even though everything around us felt rearranged. When the house finally settled, I sat at the kitchen table and let my mind drift backward to the place where all this really started. We met at the county volunteer fair the year my department rolled out the new budget aid program. She was 22, bright, impatient, wearing a blue lanyard she kept twisting around her finger. I was 30, a man who carried pens in his shirt pocket and thought punctuality was a virtue. The first thing she said to me was, "You look like you run this place," which wasn't true, but I liked how she said it. I told her I handled numbers for Mason Lake, and she laughed and said, "Good, you can stabilize me." She loved motion. That was the first real thing I learned about her. She shifted from booth to booth, talking to people like she already knew them. I stood at my table with my pamphlets squared to the edge, answering questions with careful words. When she circled back toward me the third time, she said, "You're neat. That's rare." I didn't know if it was a compliment or a warning. I took pride in being the guy who didn't flinch when the sink clogged or the numbers didn't add up. I was built for maintenance, for the long haul, for keeping things upright. And she seemed built for motion. Fast cars, last-minute trips, big gestures. Standing next to her felt like stepping into a wind tunnel, but I convinced myself I could hold steady. Dorothy, her mother, pulled me aside the first time I brought Lexi home for dinner. We were in that narrow kitchen with the floral wallpaper, and she handed me a plate and said quietly, "Clark, she needs a world, not a man." I nodded like it was sage advice and not a road sign. I married her anyway that October with a borrowed suit, a rented dance floor, and a confidence I thought counted as love. 2 years later, Gabby showed up with a blue hospital blanket and a stare like she knew secrets. I remember looking down at her in the hospital light, feeling something permanent click into place. Millie came barely 13 months after that, crying so loud the nurse said she'd never have a quiet day. Those babies reshaped everything: schedules, budgets, sleep. But they also tied me even tighter to what I thought family meant. Lexi didn't adjust the same way. She said the house felt too small, the nights too long, the routine too heavy. I chalked it up to the way winter sits on this town, dark dinner hours and icy mornings. When she said she felt trapped, I handed her the nicer coat, bought her a bigger planner, made jokes at breakfast to lighten the air. I thought that was partnership. Real estate hit her like caffeine. She could look at a yard and tell you how much a buyer would overpay just to win it. She dragged me to open houses on Saturdays and walked through everyone saying, "This isn't us anymore," even though us had never actually changed. She chased shinier. I chased stability. We never said that out loud. I picked up overtime during bus contract season, packed the girls' lunches, learned how to make pancakes without starting a fight. I became fluent in quiet. Not silence, quiet. Strategic words, soft humor, controlled tones, anything to keep storms from forming. She started calling me the brake pedal, mostly at parties when she wanted an audience. I'd stand beside her with a drink in my hand while she laughed and said, "Clark slows everything down," like I was some anchor dragging behind her shiny life. People would glance at me awkwardly, and I'd pretend not to notice. I told myself it didn't matter. A man provides. That was the sentence I lived inside. Roof, health insurance, groceries, tuition envelopes, checklists taped inside cabinet doors. Whenever she shoved for another upgrade, I bit my tongue. I told myself stability was grown-up love, and someone had to hold the ground steady while she ran circles around it. Arguments got meaner, apologies got shorter. Somewhere in there, I became the person who took the girls to school with a travel mug in hand, who read bedtime stories while Lexi texted clients about backsplash tiles and staging plans. She messaged me during meetings about open houses she wanted me to see after work, sending photos with captions like, "Imagine the kind of people who live here," as if we were auditioning for a different family's life. Looking back, I should have known the day she stood in the unfinished kitchen of that new construction house and said, "Clark, I hate the way we look poor." She didn't whisper it, didn't joke. She meant it. I stared at the quartz counters and thought, we're not poor. We're paid up and tired. But I didn't say it. I smoothed the edge of the countertop with my thumb and said we should think about it after tax season. That night, back in our real kitchen with the chipped tile and warm light, she slammed a cabinet and said, "You're dragging me down." I didn't yell. I said, "We're fine." She walked past me, grabbed her keys, and said, "Fine isn't enough." The door closed behind her, sharp as a warning shot. I remember standing there with the dishwasher humming and the girls upstairs in their room, thinking if I just stayed steady long enough, she'd settle. That was the lie I lived inside for years. The girls came down the stairs asking about snacks. I shook myself awake, grabbed the crackers, and started unloading the dishwasher because movement felt like the only thing keeping the room intact. I kept stacking plates from the dishwasher until the cabinet was full, then shut the door with more force than I meant to. The girls were upstairs getting ready for bed, and the house was finally quiet enough for the truth to settle in. That night, after wiping down the counters and locking the front door, I floated the word separation into the living room like it was a life raft. I said it calmly, like I was offering a solution instead of pulling a pin. Lexi didn't hesitate. 4 days later, 4, not 5, not a week, she filed for divorce. The envelope hit the mailbox like a bill we already owed. When I opened the packet at the kitchen table, the paper felt thin, cheap, like a receipt you crumple without thinking. I kept reading anyway. My hands didn't shake, but something inside me did. The decree came about 10 weeks after that. It arrived in a stiff white mailer with a stamp that looked bruised, purplish around the edges. I sat on the couch, held it on my lap, and let my eyes move over the words that turned 18 years into a legal formality. It settled the argument, if you could call it that, the way gravel settles at the bottom of a jar, heavy and uneven. I told myself it was a phase, a reset, something grown-ups did when they needed air. That's how I survived things. I rationalized. I made problems sound logical. I explained them to myself in bullet points until they seemed manageable. I clung to the idea she'd cool down, come home, talk like people who meant their vows. But the truth was the truth. She'd already left the marriage before the papers even found my mailbox. She packed her things in one afternoon. I remember the exact sound of the zipper on that cobalt suitcase, the same one she rolled out of our bedroom the day she slammed the door. She stuffed it with blazers, heels, the leather folio she used for showings, and 2 framed photos she didn't even glance at. When she walked past me toward the doorway, she said, "You'll manage. The same way you'd tell a contractor the pipes will fix themselves if he just shakes the valve." "The girls?" I asked, blocking the door for half a second. She barely paused. "You've already turned them." She tossed her hair like she was shedding blame. "Don't pretend you haven't." My jaw tightened so hard the back molar throbbed. "I didn't turn them," I said. "You did that by disappearing." She gave a small laugh, like the kind people use when they're done with the conversation. "You're not my problem, Clark." Then she stepped outside, tapped open her rideshare, and let me pay for it because the app was still linked to my card. She didn't even say goodbye. The first week without her felt like walking through a house someone had rearranged in the dark. The empty chair at the table was louder than the television. Millie made chili from a recipe card she dug out of a drawer, trying to keep us upright. Gabby lined up our pill organizers on the counter like we were 90 years old and couldn't remember our names. It was her way of taking control. I didn't stop her. One night after dropping the girls at youth group, I drove past Lexi's office. I told myself it was coincidence, but it wasn't. I slowed down a block away, my hands tight on the wheel. Her car wasn't there, but a luxury SUV sat in the spot beneath her name. The plate frame said a dealership from 2 counties over. The windows were tinted black, and my stomach dropped hard enough I felt stupid. I drove home ashamed of myself for looking, for caring, for needing some kind of explanation she'd never give. When the quiet got heavy, I called Dorothy. She picked up on the second ring and didn't sound surprised. "I warned you," she said, voice firm. "I told you who she was." For a second I wanted to argue, defend myself, defend Lexi, defend something. But Dorothy softened her tone and added, "Take care of your girls. Ignore the noise. Let her spin out on her own." I thanked her because it was the only thing to do. The next morning I washed my coffee mug twice and left the sink dry, wiped with a towel until it squeaked. It was a tiny act of control, but it counted. I lined up the lunch bags, packed fruit cups, wrote notes for appointments, and checked the calendar twice. Bills were paid on time, even the boring ones. By week 3, laughter started creeping back into the house. Not loud, not constant, but real enough that I felt it in the walls. At work, I sharpened pencils for the budget meeting, the same way I always did. 2 medium points and 1 fine. Habit steadied my hands. When I finished, I looked around my empty office and said out loud, "We'll be okay." No audience. Just me and the hum of the outdated HVAC unit. Saying it made it feel possible. But the nights were a different story. I set my phone face down on the nightstand, screen toward the wood, but my ears stayed tuned for the vibration. I hated that part. The listening, the half-hope, the reflex I couldn't kill. Every buzz from a spam number made my pulse jump. Every hour that passed without a message felt like a reminder that she'd moved on without looking back. Gabby knocked on my door one of those nights, hair pulled into a messy braid. "Dad, do you want tea?" she asked. I said sure, even though I didn't. She brought me a mug, set it on my nightstand, and didn't comment on the phone turned upside down. She just said, "Good night," and closed the door quietly. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying not to picture Lexi with a new life, a new guy, a new version of herself she thought she deserved. I tried not to imagine her laughing, or drinking wine in some staged kitchen, or pretending the last 18 years had been a misunderstanding. Eventually I got up, walked to the kitchen, and took out the trash. The night air was cold, sharp enough to wake me fully. I hauled the bin to the curb, hands stiff on the plastic handle, and told myself again we'd be okay. The trash bin thudded against the curb, and I went back inside to finish the budget draft. The girls were upstairs, lights low, door cracked. Everything was finally still. They didn't tell me about seeing her that week. I found out later, maybe 5-6 days after, when Gabby let it slip during a drive to Costco. She was in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, and she said it like it was weather. "We saw Mom last Thursday." The air left my lungs before I could answer. "Where?" "Harvesttown. We were grabbing milk." Millie from the back seat added, "And ramen, the good kind." I stayed quiet a beat too long. Gabby glanced over and filled in the silence. She was wearing a slate suit, heels, walked out like a commercial. "Into what?" I asked. "Black SUV, tinted windows, new dealership plate." Millie said, "She didn't see us." Gabby cut in quick. "Or she pretended not to. That's more like it." I didn't say anything, not because I didn't care, but because if I opened my mouth, the wrong thing would come out, and I'd already learned how fast that spreads in a family. Gabby looked down at her phone again. Sales guy loaded something into the trunk, box with fragile tape on it, like she was buying glass or champagne. And she was smiling, Millie added, softer. Not like she used to, just polished. I didn't ask why they waited to tell me. I already knew. They didn't want to give her space in the room, not unless she earned it, and she hadn't. That night, we ate like usual. Takeout containers, mismatched glasses, one placemat too many. The fourth plate sat where it always did, untouched, like a bookmark in the wrong chapter. Nobody looked at it, but no one moved it either. The next morning, Millie came down with wet hair and a hoodie pulled tight. I noticed it immediately. Her hair was darker. 2 full shades, maybe 3. Not dyed for style, dyed to look like someone else. "You change your hair?" I asked, careful. "Yep." She didn't explain, and I didn't push. Months later, she told me she couldn't stand seeing Lexi in the mirror every time she brushed it. She said, "It was like she lived in my face." That night, something shifted. We were eating leftovers, chilly again, and Millie got quiet, then suddenly lifted her phone, snapped a picture of the untouched place setting, stared at the screen for maybe 2 seconds, and then deleted it right in front of us. No one said anything, but it hung in the air like static. After dinner, I asked casually, "You girls heard from your mom?" They both shook their heads, too fast, too practiced. "Nope," Gabby said. "Not a word. It was a truth and a lie wrapped in one syllable. I didn't call it out. I wasn't ready to poke holes in something we were barely keeping afloat. Later that week, I went to grab a magnet from the fridge and saw her old realtor calendar still hanging there. Open houses circled in red ink, little smiley faces by the ones she liked. I stared at it for maybe half a minute, then yanked the whole thing down, tossed it in the trash. The magnet left a clean square on the stainless steel, a ghost print that looked too sharp, like a scar that healed wrong. Sunday came. After church, we drove out to Madison's Diner on Route 51. Gabby suggested pie, and no one argued. We sat at the corner booth under the flickering wall light, ordered coffee and 3 slices, lemon meringue, apple crumble, and some mystery flavor the waitress swore was the owner's favorite. The lemon one tasted like floor cleaner. Millie took 1 bite and gagged. Tastes like someone poured Pine Sol on a sponge. Gabby laughed so hard she choked on her water. I cracked up too. The whole table tipped into this strange kind of joy. Messy, loud, the kind that shows up when you've been too quiet too long. It felt like oxygen after months of fumes. We drove home with takeout boxes and that dumb pie still sitting in plastic clamshells in the back seat. The kind of thing we'd forget in the fridge and then laugh about next week. That night I was finishing reports at my desk when Gabby knocked on the doorframe. She had her school planner tucked under one arm, ponytail lopsided like she'd been lying on the couch. "Hey," she said, not looking at me. "Can we stop setting the 4th plate?" I looked up, set my pen down. "Like, just for a while," she added. "It feels weird now." I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "We can stop." She nodded once, turned to leave, then paused. "I think Millie's waiting for you to say that out loud. She won't ask." "I'll take care of it," I said. She didn't smile, didn't cry, just gave me a look that said thanks without saying anything. After she left, I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and moved the extra placemat and fork to the bottom, under the stuff we never used. No speech, no ritual. Then I turned off the overhead light, leaned against the sink, and just breathed for a while. Not because anything got easier, but because, for once, we stopped making room for someone who didn't want to be in the picture. After I packed away the extra place setting, life shifted into a rhythm I didn't recognize but couldn't argue with. There wasn't a moment where everything clicked or healed, just stacked days, one on top of the next. Lunches, oil changes, field trip forms, handouts, finals, pay periods, the shape of normal life, if you squinted. And then Gabby came home with a ring. It was a modest thing, small stone, silver band, but her eyes had that wide, steady look I hadn't seen since she was a toddler, building a block tower with both hands like it might tip at any second. She set the ring box down on the kitchen table like it was a puzzle piece that finally fit. "He's nice," she said. "You'll like him." He showed up that weekend. Khakis and clean shoes, called me sir without smirking, even offered to take out the trash after dinner. His name was Ben, and he worked part-time at a hardware store while finishing his degree in early childhood education. Gabby met him in a group project for her teaching program, and I could tell by the way he looked at her that this wasn't a phase. I was doing dishes when I asked her, "You want to invite your mom?" She didn't answer right away. She finished drying a plate, set it in the cabinet, and finally said, "Maybe." Her voice was small but even. I should at least tell her. She waited until the next day to call. Said she didn't want to do it with me in the house, so she stepped out on the porch, phone in hand. I watched from the kitchen window, but not in a way that felt proud of myself. After 5 minutes, she came back in and went straight to her room. I knocked, waited, then opened the door when she didn't tell me not to. She answered like I was a telemarketer, Gabby said. I said I was getting married, and she said, "Thanks for telling me," and hung up. "That's it?" "That's it." She didn't cry. I did. We booked Red Barn Hall, a discounted rate for a Sunday afternoon. Millie helped with the invitations, and I handled catering. Gabby just wanted it simple. She said, "I don't care about the frills. I just want it to feel real." I respected that. The day of the wedding, I kept glancing at the door like some rookie waiting to be called up to the big game. Like she'd come walking in at the last second. Maybe not to make amends, but just to show she still had some tether to us. She didn't. And when I stood up to give my toast, the words came out jagged. My voice cracked halfway through, and people smiled like it was touching, like I was a proud dad barely holding it together. But I wasn't choking on emotion. I was gagging on years of propping everything up for someone who'd long stopped showing up. That toast wasn't a goodbye. It was a burial. That night I cried. I mean, fully cried. Body shaking, pillow soaking, no point in hiding it kind of crying. Millie sat on the floor of my bedroom with her back to the bed, knees pulled in, just keeping quiet company so I didn't have to look at anyone while I fell apart. Neither of us said anything. She just stayed. I'll admit it. Over the next few days, I still caught myself glancing at the doorway out of habit. That sick muscle memory. Like a dog that checks the same empty porch for years because the leash used to clip there. I hated that part of myself, but I couldn't kill it all at once. Gabi and Ben moved into a small rental 2 blocks from the elementary school where she was subbing. I helped carry boxes, her books, his toolbox, a cheap desk from IKEA that wobbled if you breathed near it. Before I left, she handed me the blue casserole dish Lexi had used to make that awful spinach bake and said, "Keep this. I don't need it." I nodded. "Want the peace lilies?" "No, they hate me. You're the one who keeps them alive." She was right. I watered them every Sunday. One had a bent leaf that never stood straight, and for some reason, I liked that about it. Back at the house, I boxed up the last of Gabby's mail, some alumni magazine, a jury duty summons, a coupon for buy one get one frozen entrees she'd never use, and left it on the hall table. The bedroom she grew up in still had the same posters, but it didn't feel like her anymore. That's the thing no one tells you. The quiet after they move out doesn't feel like space. It feels like a break in the dam. I slept that night. Not just lay there. I actually slept. No buzzing phone, no restless counting of bills or emails or possible ways I'd failed. Work picked up with the summer budget cycle. The board threw more on my desk, and I took it like I always did, arms steady, no flinch. Numbers didn't care if your wife left you. Budgets didn't ask if your kid cried after hanging up the phone. I kept telling myself I'd feel different in the fall, when the leaves changed, when the chill came back, when school started and things got routine again. But I didn't. Not yet. So I showed up anyway. That's what I had left. Fall came, and it didn't feel different. But Millie sure did. She walked into the kitchen one night, tossed her backpack on the counter, and dropped a folded brochure in front of me. Barnwood Creek, wedding venue. She said it like she was reading a line from a script. I said yes, to the guy she'd been seeing, Evan. Graphic design tech student, always wore black jeans and carried more cables than anyone needed. Nice enough, steady, didn't talk just to fill air. He made her laugh at the dumbest stuff, which told me everything I needed to know. She swore she hated weddings, said they were cringe, her word. But now she was sketching centerpiece ideas and emailing photographers like she was pitching a campaign. I offered to help, but she ran it like a project brief. Color palette, layout, seating chart, everything by spreadsheet. One afternoon I brought up the topic the way I used to test pool water. Slow, careful, hoping it wasn't too cold. "Are we sending an invite to your mom?" Millie didn't flinch. "No," I waited. "I mean it," she said, staring right at me. "No invitation for her. She doesn't get a ticket to the life she threw out." "I just thought, maybe for closure," I offered, regretting it the second the words left my mouth. She shook her head. "We don't owe her a stage, Dad." And just like that, the conversation ended. That same week, Dorothy called. I answered in the garage, Bluetooth cutting in and out while I cleaned paintbrushes from a cabinet touch-up. Her voice was thin, breathy. "Clark, you sitting down?" "Not yet. Why?" "Lexi's boyfriend, the shiny one with the car, he got picked up last weekend." "Picked up?" "Fraud and possession. News said something about a leasing scam and Oxy in the glove box." I leaned against the workbench. "You serious?" I clipped the article. 2 paragraphs. Tiny font. "But it's him." She paused. Then quiet, like she was done preaching. "See? I told you. Bright fire, burned house." I didn't say anything for a long minute. Just stared at a smear of blue paint drying on a paper towel. Millie's wedding came fast. The venue was small, tight guest list. Maybe 70 people, tops. Folding chairs on worn plank floors, twinkle lights hung with zip ties, brisk vows read with zero fluff. She told the DJ to skip the family dance altogether. "Too weird," she said. "Let's just cut the cake and move on." And I kept my mouth shut. No mention of Lexi, not even in the toast. I'd learned my lesson the first time. Evan's folks were kind. Simple Midwestern people who cried during the vows and brought pies in plastic carriers. I shook hands, smiled for photos, and pretended like nothing was missing. 2 weeks later, work decided to test me. The assistant superintendent, slick haircut, always smelled like cologne samples, called me into his office, closed the door, and said, "We've got a little hiccup." A hiccup. There was a shortfall of $48,900 in the general fund. He used words like creative reclassification and temporary field trip deferment. Said we could shuffle line items to cover it, no one would notice. I stared at him, long and flat. "That's a policy violation." He gave a polite chuckle. "It's a gray area." "It's fraud," I said. He blinked. I didn't stop. "I'm not smoothing that. You can put it in writing if you want, but I'm CCing the controller." The room went cold. "You want to be seen as a team player," he said. "Right?" I stood. "A team doesn't cheat the parents." I went back to my office, typed up the memo, sent it with full documentation. That night, I didn't lose sleep. First time that had happened in a long while. Millie came over the next evening with a framed wedding photo and leftover cupcakes in a bakery box. We sat at the table, talking about fonts, and how one of Evan's groomsmen gave a toast that made no sense but still made people cry. She got quiet near the end, peeled the wrapper off a vanilla cupcake, and said, "You remember that photo I took? The place setting one?" I nodded. "Yeah. I deleted it the night before the wedding," she said. Keeping it felt like waiting. I didn't say a word, because there was nothing left to say. That sentence alone tore something loose I'd been carrying since the morning Lexi walked out. On their way out the door, Millie and Evan hugged me. Quick, strong. She slipped an envelope into my hand. "Open it later." I waited until the house was still. Sat in my office, lamp on low. Opened the card. Inside, her handwriting. "Please try again, Dad. You deserve someone normal." I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the photo of Lexi at Red Barn, the one I used to keep hidden under tax documents and expired coupons. I stared at it for a long minute, her head thrown back, laughing at nothing. That fake light in her eyes I used to call sparkle. And you know what? I didn't feel sad. I just felt tired. I tucked the photo into a plain envelope. Didn't trash it. Didn't shrine it either. Just filed it like paperwork that no longer needed a follow-up. That weekend I dropped groceries at Dorothy's. She met me in slippers, sweater buttoned wrong, keys in her freezer again. I found them next to a frozen lasagna and didn't say a word. Just took them out and slid them into the key bowl on her counter. Sometimes love is quiet like that. The keys clinked into Dorothy's bowl, and I stood there for a second too long, just staring at them. Then I turned off her porch light and drove home through the kind of evening that felt hollow in the middle. I didn't feel sad exactly, just thinned out. 2 days later, I was at the community college library, trying to print budget forms for the youth program grant. Machine jammed on page 2. Classic. I opened the panel, pulled out a twisted sheet, and tried not to swear. That's when I heard her voice behind me. "Staples go on the left," she said, "or you'll lose a page in the copier." I turned and saw calm hands and steady eyes. No panic, no attitude, just competence. She stepped around me, cleared the jam without commentary, then looked up and smiled like we already knew each other. Irene, circulation desk supervisor. She wore a navy cardigan, gold pen in her pocket, and a ring on a thin chain around her neck. Nothing flashy, just precise. I thanked her. She shrugged. People complicate printers. They're just stubborn, not broken. I offered to buy her a coffee across the street. She said yes, like it was no big deal. We sat by the window of that tiny shop with the crooked blinds and talked about nothing. Then talked about something. She was 45, a widow, one grown son who lived 2 hours south, ran the library like a ship, orderly, quiet, reliable. No drama, no games, no just checking in texts 3 minutes after saying goodbye. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until it showed up in front of me. I told her about the girls, my job, the way board meetings could sap the marrow out of a man. She listened, asked questions, nodded like the world didn't need fixing, just steadying. We didn't plan anything. It just kept going. 2 weeks in, my car died outside the hardware store in ankle-deep slush. I called Irene, figuring she'd maybe give me a tow number. Instead, she showed up in her beat-up hatchback with hot tea in a thermos and a laminated card for a local tow shop. "I've had to use them 3 times, she said, handing me the tea. "They're faster if you ask for Vince." Bill was $180 even. I offered to pay it all. She paid half without blinking. Didn't make a speech about fairness or independence, just handed the guy her card and said, "He's with me." The following week, St. Kellen Medical sent me a billing error from an urgent care visit back in March. Something about double charges on labs. Irene sat next to me at my kitchen table while I was on hold for 31 minutes. She took notes on a legal pad, kept the billing codes straight, and got it fixed before I even had time to get annoyed. I call that the test, even though she never knew it was a test. To her, it was just normal life. To me, it felt like breath. We didn't rush. Wednesday dinners, Saturday walks along the river trail, no declarations, no fights, no expectations taped to the fridge, just good hours. After the furnace hiccup last winter, I'd given my neighbor Mike a spare key, small town insurance. When Irene dropped by, she used it once when I was late getting home. Left stew warming on the stove and a sticky note on the microwave that said, "Don't reheat it to death." It's fine. I told the girls about her after a month. I didn't make a speech, just said I'd been spending time with someone, and they'd like her. We set up a dinner at my place. I made meatloaf, burned the edges a little. Gabby brought green beans. Millie brought sarcasm. Irene brought pie. We sat down at the kitchen table like it was just another Wednesday. It wasn't. Millie was the first to say something after the plates were cleared. "She's normal," she said, like the word was a foreign language she'd just remembered. Gabby nodded. "In a good way. Not fake normal. Just solid." Then Gabby teared up. It was sudden, sharp. She grabbed a napkin and tried to make it casual. "Sorry. It's dumb. I was just remembering that pie from the diner. The lemon one. It tasted like floor cleaner." Irene smiled. "I like tart." We laughed so hard Millie nearly tipped her glass. It wasn't forced. It wasn't for show. It was just the kind of laugh that makes a person remember they still know how. After they left, I slid the stapler forward on my desk and shut the drawer on the envelope with Lexi's photo in it. Not a dramatic gesture. Just closure by inches. At night, I started sleeping through. Not because life got easy, but because someone steady sat at the other end of the couch while the commercials ran. Irene would read, sometimes ask me questions about things that didn't matter. Do you think people who make microwave dinners eat them themselves? And I'd answer without thinking. One night she leaned against me, hand over mine, and said, "You don't have to prove anything. Not here." I didn't answer, just nodded once, because that was all I had. Some days I still looked at the calendar like a man waiting for something to go wrong, but less and less often. Normal isn't loud. It doesn't need attention. It fixes the printer, brings the tea, and stays through the hold music. And it was about time I got to feel what that was like. The day after Irene and I walked the river trail in silence, no hand-wringing, no confessions, just breathing, I got another email from the assistant superintendent. Subject line, budget flexibility proposal. He called it a compromise. Wanted me to backdate 2 purchase orders and reclassify a field upgrade as instructional programming. I read it twice, closed the tab, opened the policy binder, and wrote a response with exact citations and a CC to the board finance chair. Hit send without a tremble in my fingers. Irene packed my lunch the next morning, leftover meatballs, some carrot sticks, a folded napkin. When I told her about the email, she just said, "You did right," and moved on to asking if I wanted pears or apples next week. She never lingered in drama, never tried to inflate small wins or dissect every decision like it carried some hidden meaning. She just packed the bag and kissed my cheek like it was Thursday. Because it was. That night I finally told her the worst parts of Lexi. Not just the leaving, the performance, the way she flirted at open houses to get bigger commissions, the way she said I slowed her down in front of people, the way I held our house up with both hands while she pitched us as something she could sell if only I got out of the frame. Irene didn't flinch, didn't compare, didn't try to fix it or frame it or outdo it. She just said, "That must have been heavy," and moved her hand to mine. Her thumb brushed the edge of my palm like she was wiping off years I'd never put into words. The next morning I filed a formal ethics complaint, attached everything, the memos, the policy references, the timeline. Then I took a walk down Main Street while flurries blew in like TV static. No headphones, no phone calls, just boots on sidewalk and breath in the cold air. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. Gabby came over that weekend with a stack of hand turkeys her students had made. She dumped them on the kitchen table, then held 2 up like she was choosing between auction bids. "These 2 are the best," she said. "This one's a ninja. This one wrote your name wrong but gave you 6 fingers." "Put 'em both up," I said. "Equal representation." She laughed and made me hang them on the fridge. First time I've had fridge art in years. Millie stopped by the next day with a tube under her arm. New contract from a local print shop. She designed our school district's carnival poster. It looked clean and bright, with cartoon balloons and big block letters. She leaned over while I unrolled it. "Check the bottom corner." I squinted. There I was, a tiny cartoon of me with glasses and a calculator, holding a pie chart like a shield. "You serious?" I asked. She grinned. "Consider it legacy branding." Dorothy had a good day the following week. I stopped by with soup and laundry detergent. She sat at the kitchen table in a warm fleece, her eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. She motioned me to sit. I told the girls. Told them what? That I warned you. That I saw it coming. That I loved them and couldn't fix Lexi. She said it plain. Not cruel, not proud. Just a fact she'd carried too long. "Thank you," I said. "They deserve to know," she said. So did you. The next Saturday, I took Irene to Harvesttown Market. She wanted apples and good tea. We turned into the produce section, and I felt it before I saw it. Tight smiles, quick glances, 2 of Lexi's old real estate colleagues standing near the citrus bins. They looked right at me, then at Irene, then back down at the grapefruits. Irene leaned close and asked, "These okay, or too soft?" I looked down. She was holding 2 apples, 1 in each hand, calm as ever. "They're perfect," I said. She bagged them, turned the cart, and kept moving. No flinching, no theater, No long looks or whispered names, just apples. The controller backed me the following Monday. Official letter in my inbox saying the policy review was solid and my ethics complaint had merit. 2 weeks after that, the assistant superintendent sent out a district-wide notice. He was relocating due to family needs. Same day his name disappeared from the staff directory. Funny how timing works. That night, Irene and I were sitting in the living room watching some dumb game show, one of those where people yell answers and the host pretends to care. I was halfway through a sentence about new copy paper when I just stopped. I looked over at her. My voice came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't apologize. I don't owe Lexi a thing. Irene didn't blink, just turned to me and said, "No, you don't." Then she picked up the remote and changed the channel. No ceremony, no analysis, just permission to let go. After she left that night, I walked into my office and opened the drawer. The photo was still there, in the envelope now. I didn't throw it out, didn't tear it. I just looked at it for a second, nodded like it was an account marked settled, and closed the drawer. Didn't lock it, didn't need to. It was a Thursday night. Irene and I were on the couch, half watching the weather report. Some storm line was drifting in over the lake. Red band, high wind warning, nothing we hadn't seen a dozen times before. She had a blanket over her knees, a pen in her hand, jotting something in a little notebook she never let me read. The doorbell rang. 2 quick hits, sharp like knuckles meant it. I stood up slow, expecting a neighbor, maybe Mike with another toolbox favor, maybe a package drop that needed a signature. I opened the door. Lexi. Older. Same stance. Eyes sharp but tired like she'd lost just enough power to be dangerous in shorter bursts. She said my name like a dare. Clark. And the house tilted. Pain slammed into my chest like someone parked a truck on it. I staggered once, grabbed the door frame, and dropped hard. No time to call out, no dramatic collapse. Just down. The last thing I remember seeing was the pattern in the rug. Burgundy with little diamonds. Then everything blurred. I heard Irene's voice, tight, focused, louder than she ever speaks. I heard my name once, then the sound of her running barefoot across the tile. I must have passed out before the sirens. What I know from the rest came later. Irene called 911 immediately. No fumbling, no second try. She used the landline because it was closest. Mike, my neighbor, showed up less than 3 minutes later. Used the spare key I gave him last winter when the furnace acted up. The ambulance from St. Kellen pulled into the driveway in 9 minutes flat. Paramedics rushed inside, gear bags hitting the floor. Irene had already placed my wallet and insurance card on the entryway table. Stacked, ready, no panic. Lexi tried to push into the hallway. "I'm his ex-wife," she said, loud and brittle. Irene didn't raise her voice. She stepped into the doorway, blocked her clean. "Paramedics only," she said, then handed the lead EMT my ID like it was a script she'd practiced. At the hospital, Gabby and Millie showed up just behind the ambulance. They told me later the nurse at the ICU desk stonewalled them until the doctor gave the all clear. They said their hands were shaking when they signed the visitor sheet. Then the shaking stopped. Lexi was in the lobby, tried to talk her way past the reception desk, said she had a right to see me, used the word family like it meant something. Security got called after her voice carried down the hall. Turned out she had an active warrant, failure to appear in court, tied to her boyfriend's mess from that fraud and possession case. Dorothy was the one who told us later, and Gabby found the article. Buried local coverage, 2 paragraphs long, no photo. Police didn't cuff her there, not in the hospital, but they told her to leave. She blamed the girls, said they turned me against her, said this was what happens when people poison bloodlines. Millie stared right at her. "You don't get to do that anymore," she said. Gabby said nothing, just stood there, blocking the elevator with her arms crossed. It was the first time Lexi had seen both of them together in almost 2 years. For the first time, they didn't absorb it, didn't make room for it, didn't let it stick. The nurse told the officer that my emergency contact was my partner. That word, Partner, said in a neutral tone by a stranger in a scrub top, ended the argument. Irene stayed calm the whole time, answered questions, signed the consent forms, handed over my allergy list from memory. When the girls asked how she knew all that, she said, "I've been paying attention." They went home with her that night. Said they sat on the couch in my living room, shoes off, blanket over both their laps, and just breathed. That's what they told me. I woke up the next morning to the soft beep of the monitor and the pale green curtain pulled halfway around the bed. The air smelled like plastic and sanitizer. My chest ached like I'd been run over by something too heavy to name. I blinked a few times, felt the tubes, registered the noise, and then saw their faces. Gabby on the left, Millie on the right, both of them still in the same clothes from yesterday. I didn't try to sit up, didn't ask what happened, didn't crack a joke or reach for wisdom. I just looked at them and asked, "You girls okay?" Millie nodded. Gabby smiled a little. Neither spoke, and that was enough. The second day in the hospital was quieter. Gabby dozed in the corner with a magazine open across her lap. Millie half-watched some muted crime show on the mounted TV. I shifted on the pillow and said, "Had a dream last night." Millie looked up first. "Yeah?" "Lexi walked in," I said. But I didn't feel anything. Not mad, not sad, just like she wasn't part of the room. Gabby sat up straighter. "So you're over her?" It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. "Yeah, I am." Millie nodded back, calm and easy. "About time." I asked where Irene was. Gabby said she'd stepped out to call the library about a schedule swap. A few minutes later, she came in with a to-go coffee and a paperback tucked under her arm. Not dramatic, not performative, like she belonged in any room I was in, and we both knew it. I signed the do not visit form without asking questions. The nurse nodded, stapled it to the chart, and moved on. The officer handling Lexi's situation said the warrant would take care of the rest. I didn't ask for updates. When the girls were leaving that afternoon, I stopped them. "I'm sorry," I said, "for keeping the drawer full, for waiting at the door, for setting that fourth plate like it was sacred." Millie rolled her eyes in that earned-it way only a daughter can. "Dad," Gabby said, "we knew. We let you catch up." Before they left, Gabby turned back and added, "Dorothy had a clear day. She remembered your birthday was last week. Called it past due." I chuckled. "We'll bring her soup next week." That night, Irene sat in the chair beside my bed with her legs crossed, reading. I stared at the ceiling and said, "Did you know you're the most normal thing I've ever let into my life?" She didn't look up, just said, "That's not a very high bar." I laughed and coughed at the same time. She stood, poured water, handed it over, then sat again and kept reading. We didn't talk about Lexi. We didn't need to. We talked about snow tires and the grant cycle. Her son was coming up next month for a weekend visit. Said he wanted to meet the guy who made her smile through budget season. That was enough. A week later, I was home. The girls came over and filled the fridge like it was some mission. Irene had left fresh sheets on the bed and chili in the crock pot. She came by that evening, checked the thermostat, asked if I needed anything, and didn't hover. After they all left, I opened the desk drawer. The envelope was still there. I took out the photo. Lexi on that railing at Red Barn, laughing at nothing, light in her hair. I stared at it for a minute, waiting for the old ache to rise. Nothing. Just paper. Just weightless. I slipped it back into the envelope, slid it under tax files, and shut the drawer without ceremony. Later in the kitchen, the kettle clicked off. I turned and looked at Irene, standing by the stove, sleeves rolled. "I love you," I said. No music behind it. Just true. She looked over. "I love you too." Then she opened the oven door to check the rolls because the timer had gone off. Saturday, the girls came by. We made pasta, watched some dumb game show where the host wore awful ties, and passed a bowl of garlic bread around the table. No one set a fourth plate, and for the first time, the silence in the house felt like peace, not waiting. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who paid the bills and kept the lights on, and if there's justice in anything, it's this. When Lexi came knocking to reclaim the life she threw away, there wasn't anything left to claim. She taught me what I won't live with. Irene showed me what living feels like. I'll take that trait every day until it stops feeling like a debt. Before you head out, let me throw something real your way. If someone from your past tried to walk back into your life after burning it down, would you open the door or finally shut it for good? If you've got the hype feature, please give it a tap so this story can reach more people who might need it. And take a second to subscribe and hit like. It's a small click that means a lot. Drop a comment too, even a simple good story or your honest take. I'd love to hear what you think. Love you guys.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.